by connecting pilots with our industry and government partners.
Guiding them in adapting their existing technologies to meet new challenges set by the NCSC. The companies that you're going to hear from today have raised in excess of £500 million worth of equity. They've created more than 1,600 jobs.
Government will explore ways in which GCHQ's expertise can more directly benefit economic growth and support the development of the UK cybersecurity sector. We've got one company IPO, trust stamp, valuation of 28 million. 11 have been acquired.
NCSC, of course, has a massive responsibility on a government level, but they spare time to support startups and innovators to really understand how we can make this collective difference.
Traditionally, cybersecurity is sold on fear of bad things happening, but actually if you can find the other angle of looking after your data and how looking after your security and being ethical is a good thing.
Welcome back. Now please welcome the NCSC's Deputy Director, Growth, Chris Ensor, OBE, and his panellists to discuss their perspectives on building a workforce of the future, human-machine teaming and beyond.
So, good morning. Welcome to the second plenary session of the day. What we'll show in the slide in a second is two statements. So one is from the integrated review, which sort of sets out the sort of government's view of the sort of the vision for the UK being a technical superpower. And on the other side, you'll see the data from the DCIT skills workforce survey. And what you'll see on one side is that vision. On the other side, you'll see the skills gap. So, 50% have a basic skills gap, and sort of 30-odd% have an advanced skill gap. And whilst, okay, that's cyber skills, if you look at the technologies that are outlined in the integrated review, the foundational kind of knowledge and skills that sit within those are very much the same. So I think the question is, how are we going to fill that skills gap? And is AI the knight in shining armor that will allow us to sort of fill it? So that's what we're going to do today. And so firstly, I'm going to ask the panel to introduce themselves. They'll do it far better than I will. So starting with Cian.
Hi, yeah, so I'm Cian Galvin. I'm the Deputy Director for Cyber Skills Innovation in the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology.
Sammy.
Thanks, Chris. Hi, my name is Sami Khoury, and I'm the head of the Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Stephen Bonner. I'm the Deputy Commissioner at the Information Commissioner's Office.
Hi, I'm Claudia Nathanson, and I'm the chair of the UK Cybersecurity Council, and I've been implementing security for decades across industries and sectors.
So thank you all. So good panel, so we'll have a good discussion. So let's cut to the chase. So it takes a long time to build cybersecurity skills. And what we could do is we could look at AI and say, well, AI is going to fix this for us, so we don't need to bother at the moment. But are we kind of wishing for too much there? Stephen, what's your view? Will it save us?
I mean, wouldn't it be fantastic if none of us had to worry that in just a couple of years' time, technology is going to solve all our problems? Sadly, although we're going to look for solutions today, we're not going to be able to resolve the skills gap by purely using AI. However, it's going to help. It's going to allow us to take the worst parts of our day and make it a little bit easier. I don't think, there's this worry that people have that they're going to be replaced by AI in their job, and particularly in our roles, I don't think that's the case. I think it's the case for any role. But there's something quite powerful, a quote I've heard a few times now. It's not that AI is going to take your job, it's the person who knows how to use AI most effectively is going to take your job unless you learn how to use it effectively. And I think that's the lesson we can all take, that AI can make our jobs better, can improve the skills gap, but no, sadly, I don't think it's going to fix it for us.
So how do we best prepare the workforce? Sami, do you have any views on AI is coming? How do we do what Stephen says, and how do we best prepare the workforce for what's coming ahead?
Thanks, Chris. Yes, AI is coming, and we have to be prepared. So if we look at, many of us are familiar with the S-curve of innovation. Where we fall on the S-curve is a little bit maybe uncertain at this point, but I feel that we are on the steep slope of the S-curve. So there's still a lot of progress, a lot of room to improve, a lot of room to learn. Having said that, preparing the workforce does not exist in a vacuum. A workforce exists in a workplace. So we have to look at preparing the workforce and preparing the workplace. So just a few words on maybe the workplace, ensuring that there are some policies in place that guide us as we develop the workforce, to be mindful of compliance and sort of regulatory obligation, but also to be mindful of security and safety of these AI systems. And we, as a community, we've talked a lot about the sort of secure by design and in building security into all of these things. But shifting now to the point about developing the workforce, I feel that at the very least, we all welcome change, except when it affects us directly. And that's where the sense of panic kicks in. So it's important that we are transparent in preparing the workforce for the advent of things like generative AI, to pick champions, to pick learners, to pick people who are willing to take some risks and who are not afraid to fail. And also, having said that, to pick a few projects or a few use cases that can be explored in bite-sized chunks in order to be able to assess the value that a generative AI model or a generative AI tool bring to us. Again, it's meant to enhance our work, not meant to take over our work, so that we can focus on what humans do best, which is think and create.
So Sami, just to follow up on that, do you think we sometimes confuse using the IT, using AI to designing the next generation? Because they're sometimes two very different skills there. Do you think we confuse it? It's like, yeah, we want those people to be able to use it, which is important, but actually we also want a cadre of people who can design the next and the next. You think that's a confusion that we have?
Yes, absolutely. And I think we have to spend a bit of time thinking about the future and thinking how those capabilities will help us in our day-to-day work. Not, we use AI for automation, but AI or generative AI is not just for automation. It's meant to really provide us with insight into what we do. And there are some very specific applications where these capabilities can really enhance our day-to-day.
Dean, do you want to come in there?
Yeah, I think if you look back at the sort of mega trends of technology, it's been empowering the end user. We're moving from mainframes to mini systems to desktops to phones. And I think it'll be quite interesting to see that I think some of the most interesting innovation will come not from centralized AI products being developed, by placing these capabilities in the hands of individuals, and they'll be enabled to make their day-to-day life easier themselves. So I think we'll see a lot more of this future where there aren't centralized IT departments doing this. There'll be individuals, which to your point about preparing the workforce and thinking about safety and security is so much more important, because we're going to have to influence large numbers of individuals, not just a few large organizations. We need to do both, but that's going to be, I think, where some of this hits the road. And the point you made about preparing for it coming, it's here now. Even an organization like the ICO, we've rolled out AI. We're using chatbots in some of our complaints handling, and we're using it for some of our triaging emails that come in, because we get hundreds of thousands of contacts every year. And I think the fascinating thing about this moment around AI is that it's very exciting and new and interesting, and there's all this new change. It's also got decades of history. I was looking back, and we did call it big data and AI, so obviously we were a bit not quite using the right terms for now, but we were talking about this a decade ago, publishing papers about how to do this safely. So I think there's an awful lot of knowledge already established that we shouldn't let the excitement and hype of this particular moment, which is an important moment, we shouldn't lose track that there is a lot of experience and capability amongst all of us to develop these kind of tools effectively.
So you say you're using it already. It'd be interesting to understand how you get confidence. What skill sets do people need to have to actually get confidence that it's doing the right thing? So if you're using these things to do your complaints and things, how do you know it's working?
So, I mean, it takes a multidisciplinary team. So we have deep technologists who help design the systems, as you've talked about among them. But actually the people who know if it's working are those who are running our complaint system. They're the ones who know which complaints want to be triaged through and which ones can be put on lower priority. We do deal with all of them, but we do want to pull out the ones that are most urgent and interesting. And we've obviously had very close engagement with them to check that it is working correctly and that it continues to do so. I mean, one of the interesting things about the sort of generative AI model is it's trained on a historical data set. It's very good at handling circumstances in that historical data set. One of the things I would suggest most, what keeps certainly me interested in this career, and I think many of you as well, is that this is a world that changes very rapidly. So you can't just test one of these systems, deploy it, and ignore it, because the environment, the reality keeps changing, so you've got to make sure the system is updating to be maintained with that.
Okay, so if we make the assumption then that AI isn't going to save us, it isn't the white knight, it's a tool that practitioners can use, but they have to use it in the right way. And there's lots of examples of tools not being necessarily used in the right way. I want to start thinking about the council, as we have Claudia here. I mean, as a practitioner myself, I think we're at a moment where, for the first time, I can start to see a kind of a pathway and a destination. I mean, but it's taken me kind of 35 years to kind of get there, and we haven't got the time to do that. And I think so, you know, at these events, we've seen the council grow from its infancy and start to mature, and now have launched a number of specialisms. And I think how important is it for us as the community as a whole to kind of to help drive the demand for the council standards? Cian, do you want to pick that up as you were instrumental in kind of setting the council up?
Yeah, and when thinking about this, I always go back to why was the council set up in the first place? And I think that cyber as a profession is quite a complex space. There's a range of certifications, qualifications, degrees, and fantastic puzzle pieces, but there's no one coherent puzzle. And what that makes it really difficult for is for the employer employing their first cybersecurity practitioner, or the graduate considering a career in cybersecurity more broadly. You can't Google, how do I get into cybersecurity, and get the same answer in the first 10 results. So the key to this is really simplifying it, and that's the work of the council. That's making it clear, what do you need to know and be able to do at all stages, from junior to senior, across all the relevant specialisms. So with that in mind, how do we make sure this sticks? Because ultimately, there's no point having the answers if nobody uses them. And we have to start exploring how can employers embed these standards, these titles, these pathways into learning and development in the office, into recruitment processes, into purchasing and their approach to procurement more broadly. And I think for me, government has a really key role as first buyer in this regard. right now, there's no requirement that cyber practitioners be registered with the council, but we have to build that behavior change. And government, as possibly the biggest cyber employer in the UK, has to lead the charge in that regard. We have to embed it and normalize it, and then that supports other employers across the UK to follow suit. And so then we normalize a profession that has standards, that has titles, that has clear pathways. And ultimately, it's simple for the potential entrant to the workforce, and it's simple for the cyber employer to navigate. And that's the point we want to get to.
So, Claudia, I'm going to come to you in a second, but Sammy, just to give you a little time to think, we've set up the UK Cybersecurity Council. I'd be interested in your view from a Canadian perspective, so hold that while I bring in Claudia. Claudia, as the chair of the council, how important do you think it is that we kind of drive the demand for the council?
Chris, it's so large but so important. And I want to answer the question also because, like my colleagues who are also practitioners, you will probably align with some of what I have to say. I think as we talk about new technologies, and I think the first thing that the government wanted to do is to be doing something that no other country has ever done. Let's just put that out there first. We're a self-regulatory body for the cybersecurity profession. No other country has achieved that. And in fact, we had no manual to tell us how to do that. And in fact, this is why we get a lot of interactions from other countries saying, wow, you are at least taking the bull by the horns. Can you tell us how to do it? We say we are writing the manual as we do it. But why is this important for us? I think the council, like other bodies, whether it be engineering, medicine, law out there, bodies are important because for them, they want people to have trust and confidence in the profession and the professionals who are delivering what it is that that council is representing. And I think for us, it's the same thing. For us, it's about the standards, the core set of standards that we need to absolutely implement cybersecurity. So the thing is with that, for those who implement security like myself, you will know that there are core things. It doesn't matter what the new technology is. It doesn't matter. That foundational standards have to be there. And everybody has a set of core foundational standards that they must meet. For us, we have started already. As I said, we are 3 years old. The other councils, for example, law and medicine, you look at them, 300 years old, 200 years old. We are 3 years old. But we have started to get those standards out. We have 4 core standards. And just to remind you that Chris again has a Stream C later today at 1:30. I won't have enough time to get into a lot of things. But starting with the core standards, and I just needed to put it out there because you will identify with them. You have something, for example, when you look on secure audit and assurance, core to everything that we do. Security governance and risk management, key again, you can't. You have secure system architecture and design, another core thing. You're talking about AI, you're talking about new technologies, that has to be integrated, security seamless into there, that is where design. Many of you probably are architects who have design authority boards that you talk about this integration. And of course, secure testing. And I put it out there only because I want to say this. If you look at a lot, and Stephen probably knows it because he probably gets some of these breach reports, most breaches it's not about the technology. It's either human error, maybe misconfigurations, credentials stealing, all of those things. But it is human error or failure to apply policy, process, and procedures. And you know policies are aligned to standards and controls. So the first thing the council wants to do is to make sure that they are the core standards, the core building blocks, that the professionals are able to implement competently. That's the difference. Competence is important for us. And I just liken that to, we think we can drive, so we know the motorway code, and then we get in there with the examiner, and then he says, let's test your competence to drive. Sorry, you failed your driver's license. So I think for us, it's about the standards. It's about engendering trust in the professional who is going to be implementing those standards, the competence of that person so that we have that trust and confidence. But also, for the government, it's important that we have integrity and ethics in what we are doing. And we are adding things such as communication, how we get buy-in from the rest of an organization to do the right thing. And of course, we need that to be coming down from the execs. I'll stop there for now, but as I say, Stream C, great time for more questions and answers with Chris and some other folks on the council.
Good advertising, thank you for that. And it reminds me to remind you at the end as well. So I think what the council has brought is that common set of standards. And there's so many qualifications out there, and they all have a place. It's always difficult to say what that place is. And I think that's where the council brings that kind of common exchange rate. So I mean, looking from Canada, what do you think of what we're trying to do here with the council in the UK?
I think it's a great idea. We don't have a council that has set up those standards yet, but probably an idea that we could copy or steal from our UK colleagues. Having said that, I mean, we do invest a lot into a continuous learning journey, starting at the Cyber Center, where every employee is encouraged to push the limits of the learning to participate in events like Cyber UK and others. More broadly, we do work with Canadian universities and Canadian colleges for cybersecurity programs to make sure that the program has a sense of consistency or has a sense of being up to date with what the marketplace needs. But also within government, through the Canadian School of Public Service, offer courses that some of them we develop to the broader public service on bringing them up to speed on some of the challenges that we see every day in cyber. So making the workforce, the broader public sector workforce more cyber ready by being aware of and this course will be mandatory starting in the fall of this year, that everybody will have to take this virtual course as a mandatory requirement for a bit of up to refreshment on cybersecurity.
I think, interestingly, the whole thing about international alignment is going to be, because we've got a lot of global players in this space, and people will say, you're doing something in the UK that's separate from everybody else. How is this going to align? And I think it's a really tricky thing, because it's an immature subject, and everybody's at very different places on their journey. And I think that alignment's going to be really important, but it's going to be quite tricky. So we're happy to share whatever we've done to try and ensure that alignment. So yeah, work in progress, I think. So, so I suppose controversially, and I'll come to Stephen next, you know, should we be mandating these standards? From an NCSC perspective, and we are certainly starting to use the standards as evidence of competence in the delivery of industry services. A lot of the work I do is badging good industry services. And it's certainly saved us from doing our own skills assessments of people. We can now look to the council standards and say, before you come to us with your service, you need to have those competent people. So we're kind of already mandating it. If you want a badge for your service, then you need to meet the council standards. But as coming from the regulator perspective, ManDation is always a slightly controversial term when
And it's really tricky because of the scope of what we regulate. So we're looking at some of those global players at the very top end of this kind of ecosystem with deep expertise and deep pockets, investing millions, facing the most difficult threats. And we're also regulating individual organizations and people at the very other end of the economy where we want to see growth and 1,000 of those SMEs springing up and developing. So finding the right answer for both is very tricky. And as a regulator, we've tended to avoid specifying particular solutions. We're much more interested in innovation supporting things. However, our law that we regulate is very clear. You must have adequate technical and organizational security controls. And definitely one way to demonstrate to us you do have adequate organizational controls is that your staff are properly skilled, qualified, and are carrying the right proof that they are competent to do their roles. So we would definitely look favorably on organizations that had invested and developed their staff to the highest levels, as some of these as the council demonstrates. So that's definitely something we look kindly on. It is possible to achieve a similar level without engaging with that purpose, so we wouldn't necessarily hold it against you as long as you had done something. And Claudia mentioned about the incidents we see in the data we analyze. Sadly, within our data, we quite often see a large number of the most significant incidents as highlighted, are not caused by highly competent teams doing their very best in a difficult threat environment. They're a complete absence of capability. The kind of flaws we keep finding that are causing significant harm to UK citizens are things like admin accounts with blank passwords. This is not, we're not that worried about Gen AI threats at this point when the large volume things like that. It's external services exposed to the internet without two-factor authentication. These are 1990s problems that we are still dealing with now. So I think the embedding of skilled and qualified capability across the industry to help us eliminate these kind of hygiene factors would dramatically improve things. So we are big fans of upping the standards. Would we require a particular qualification? I think that's unlikely, but for those that have it and have demonstrated that kind of commitment, that's definitely something we look for when we're investigating to try and understand what's happened, because we absolutely understand that bad things can happen to good people. That just because you've had an incident doesn't mean you didn't have adequate security controls. Equally, though, just because you haven't had an incident doesn't mean you do have adequate controls, or even more tellingly, just because you haven't detected an incident doesn't mean you don't have adequate security controls. So we'll be doing plenty of work to look into that, and one of our future AI projects is that we recognize there's large scale of more minor but aggregate threat through non-compliance. It's very easy for us to take action against the giant data breaches that are very obvious, but there's a whole series of non-compliance at much higher volume but lower value that makes it hard for us to take action because we pick on one particular organization. Well, everyone else has this problem. So what we're building there are AI tools to let us scale like a sort of parking tickets rather than major murder investigations. We'll be able to ticket everyone who isn't complying and that way drive the change. So I think those standards are very important and something we definitely look for in organizations.
Claudia, and then I'll come to Sammy.
Yeah, I think that's a good segue as well, Stephen, because I just wanted to say, a lot of folks ask us, well, I'm a small organization. Do you really want me to be applying these standards? How does that work? And I think I needed to add that with the standards, we're aligning specialisms to titles. And titles get you on a progressing rate because it does two things. We have to grow the profession. We don't have enough professionals at the moment, so we need to grow the profession. We also have aligned titles to specialisms because we know not every organization will require the same level of implementation of a standard. And so we may look at those tasks and we will start to align them to what we think the title level should be for that standard. The other thing is that in terms of aligning standards as well, it means that we have 4 titles. One is the associate level, then we had principal, but we have now put in a practitioner level in between, which allows us to leave the associate to grab those people who probably want to enter with limited cyber knowledge, no cyber knowledge at all, to start building their portfolio on their cyber and starting to move up the titles as they wish. So you'd have associate. Now we are looking at practitioner, and then you have principal, and then you have chartered. So now we have those titles. So I would encourage people that not because you may feel that you don't have to go straight for chartership, your organization may not require that level as well. And I just wanted to add that people sometimes ask me, so now are you boxing people into a specialism? The thing is, in the competency route, it says that your experience matters. Your knowledge matters. Your knowledge is the start of you going through the whole titles, but you're bringing together your knowledge, then you're bringing together your experience as you grow, and that experience feeds your competence. And so there's a path that you can take, and there's a way that your organization can fit into it, whether it's large or whether it's small, and it doesn't matter about the sectors. One of the things we need to do as practitioners is that I think we need to understand our business that we are protecting. Many of us don't understand the business. We just want to secure, but you need to understand the business, more about the business, and that way we are seen more as enablers rather than barriers.
Sammy, did you want to come in on?
I just wanted to give a kind of perspective from across the pond for the question on ManDation and what Stephen has shared a few minutes ago. There's currently no cybersecurity sort of requirement in Canada. We're not a regulator, but sectors have regulatory requirement maybe for specific types of incidents. But the government has introduced a bill that's going through Parliament right now that will introduce some cybersecurity requirement on sectors that will be mandatory to have a cybersecurity plan, so developing the workforce, demonstrating that we will be working with the regulators on assessing those cybersecurity plans, so hopefully establishing some standards. We're starting with 4 sectors: energy, telecommunication, finance, and transportation, as critical infrastructure sectors in Canada that requires sort of upping the bar. By all means, all these companies do take cybersecurity seriously, but there is a sort of a non-uniform way to demonstrating how they do it. So now that we will work with individual regulators to set some sort of bar that they have to meet, and I hope that they exceed that bar and they don't use that bar as simply the minimum that they have to achieve. And we keep constantly pushing the bar up and making sure that not only the company takes cybersecurity seriously, but they develop the teams, the good teams, to push the envelopes constantly.
So I'm going to come back to Stephen in a second, because I want to pick up on equivalency, because I think this is an interesting challenge, and there's a skills challenge in there. One of the experiences we have with Cyber Essentials is, again, often we can't mandate it. You have to say, and provide alternative evidence. But of course, when alternative evidence is provided, you need to have the skills to then assess that alternative evidence. So how do you bootstrap that? So if somebody comes along and says, oh, I haven't got, we had nobody that was chartered by the council in our organisation before we had our breach, but we've got all these things here. How do you manage that?
I mean, that's the excellent work of the professionals in my teams that have to make those kind of judgments. I wish that was a very common problem we were facing. Sadly, the kind of events that are getting in front of us are where we are, oh, what do you have equivalent? They say, well, we have this poster in the break room that no one's looked at for 5 years, and, well, we outsourced it to this company because they were very cheap, and we didn't actually specify any cybersecurity within the contract. And then we can go, yeah, it doesn't take that much depth of expertise and thing to work out. We don't think that's equivalent to the excellent work that you would get if you had properly qualified and certified your staff. I think when we may see it as international organizations, they may be complying with equivalents around the world, but as demonstrated, we're at the front here, so it's very hard for others to demonstrate that. So generally, sadly, that isn't that much of a challenge for us, because sadly, very rarely do people present effective things that is quite a difference. And broadly, it's not that hard to tell if an organization has taken this seriously or not. How they engage with us, how open they've been about the incident. I think you've got some people talking over the next couple of days who clearly have handled their incidents well, have shared the learnings. That gives us great confidence, these organizations that are taking it seriously, even if they've had terrible things happen to them. And that's certainly something we take in mind. Actually, in our new formal fining guidance, those organizations that engage NCSC or an equivalent appropriate body, we have to still have that, but we then actually take that into account when setting the fines. You will get a lower fine if you bother to engage with NCSC as part of your incident, if it's appropriate to do so, because we see that demonstrates that kind of knowledge, capability, and learning. But yeah, sadly, we've yet to see many things of the quality and equivalence where it becomes a difficult decision. It is generally, sadly, there are many organizations that are not even close to meeting the minimums we would expect, and they're the ones, obviously, that we're putting our regulatory time and attention into to help improve their standards.
That's a really interesting observation, and I suppose for those who haven't even thought about it, then the easiest way to do it is meet the council standards, because then you don't have to make an argument or anything like that. It's already there and available. Similar with Cyber Essentials. Get yourself a Cyber Essentials certificate, and that makes life a lot easier for those, for those who don't have the skills to be able to judge whether what you've done is equivalent, because it is really, really hard.
And Cyber Essentials are very important. We definitely take that into account. Now, clearly, we're a risk-based regulator. When we see you're working in very high-risk environments with very damaging data against a very high level of threat, Cyber Essentials is not going to be enough. But if you haven't even bothered to do that, we certainly will take a conclusion from that about how seriously you're taking this kind of thing.
And the incident management standard is on the drawing board at the moment.
Yeah, so we've got the full set, basically.
Yeah, we do.
So I'm going to move on a little bit now, and we talked about I put up the sort of quote from the integrated review, and kind of that skills gap. And ultimately, if you want to fill this at scale, we kind of have to look to the education system to deliver the skill sets that we need. And Cian, I'll come to you now. So do you think the education system is future ready in how we are developing and training our kind of future technologists?
Yeah, I think, so if we look at our labor market surveys for cyber, the annual ones, it shows there's still a skills gap and there's still a skills shortage. So there's more that can be done. And I think for me, it's actually splitting out the roles and responsibilities for who needs to play a part in that role of taking someone, a young person, into all the way through the pipeline into a career in cyber. And I think it starts with building a national pool of young people who understand technology, who understand how it works. If you can make it, you can break it and build it back better. And that's kind of very much relying on the education system as it currently exists and on the curriculum as it currently exists. And we're also heavily relying on computer science. But we see gender diversity in computer science is very low. We see that take-up of computer science at GCSE and A-level is maybe half of the traditional sciences. So there is a problem there, and how do we resolve that? And it feels as though there's thinking going on as to what we can do there. We have a task force, a joint DCIT DFE task force that looks at this question in a bit more detail. So slightly plugging that a report will come on that in the next couple of months. But there's also, around building the national pool and relying on the education system, there's an extracurricular bit to inspire and enthuse outside of the classroom. We want to get young people excited outside of the classroom to then inform their choices inside of the classroom. And that's where Cyber First plays this huge role. And you can already see a lot of the schools that engage with Cyber First, their pickup of those important subjects like computer science, there's a notable increase. So then the exam question becomes, we found an extracurricular initiative that works. How do we scale that? How do we make sure that every young person in the UK, every school, every teacher has access to that offering? And how do we do that most effectively? And then the third bit, which really underpins everything, is a very clear demand signal from cyber employers and tech employers more broadly. What does a career in cyber actually entail? How do we enthuse people with the day-to-day of wanting to enter this field? And when they're making their choices in school, they consider a career in cyber and tech just as much as they consider a career in law or medicine or engineering. And that's the point we need to get to. I think that's where some of the work of the council is so vital in setting that professional infrastructure. But there's also a need to almost, for a marketing pitch around that professional infrastructure that says, come work here, these are the opportunities that it unlocks, this is the excitement that you can see on a day-to-day basis. These are the role models that you can look to and try to replicate their career paths if you want to join. So for me, is there more to be done? Yes, but I think there's a layered approach to it where it builds on the DFE work in the curriculum space, it builds on what we know in the extracurricular space that works, and it relies on employers, whether government, industry, academia, to really sell the career in this space as well.
And interestingly enough, so we run our girls' competition every year, and we had the gala dinner in Oxford, and talking to the teachers there who'd brought their students along, some of the teachers were saying, the thing that cyber does that they've not found anything else to do is it captures an interest, and they don't know why, but they've said there's been nothing previously that has got their students to go, oh, technology does this, and I could have a career in it. And they didn't know why, but there's something there's a hook. And of course, once you've hooked, then you can potentially talk about quantum and AI and all the other things. So it just seems to capture the imagination, and I think we have to basically build on that. So, Sammy, have you cracked this in Canada? Are you delivering those, uber tech people through your school system?
No, sorry to disappoint you, but we have not cracked this in Canada. We are on the way. We learned a lot, and the education system is adapting, but it needs a bit of a bootstrap to get us faster where we need to be. So You know, we have many employees who volunteers in school to get young kids interested in cybersecurity. We've given Raspberry Pis to schools to, again, get them excited about technology, encouraging students to go STEM research, to join the STEM sort of field of studies. We've published books on career in cybersecurity and working with also indigenous communities in the Canadian far north to also get them excited in cybersecurity. And we've established an apprentice program at the Cyber Center where we invite these indigenous students to join us. So we are doing bits, but Canada is a huge country and we need help regionally everywhere. So we are counting on businesses and other provincial governments to also support that sort of an uplift of the education system so that we get the workforce ready.
I think the thing I've observed is it comes back to this using tech versus designing and inventing the next technology. And when people say to me, what skills are you looking for? It's ultimately, it's not the people who can put in bbc.co.uk in the browser. It's the people who can then explain how that happens. How does this web page magically appear? How does the infrastructure work that's behind that? And finding people who've got that sort of passion to kind of go, what goes on inside the box? That's the people we are looking for. But we need both. I mean, that's always the challenge here. It's not one skill set. We need a breadth of skill sets. But the one that we find hard is those people who've got that kind of depth into how it all works. Watching the time, Claudia, diversity, especially gender, is important. How do we sustainably encourage it?
No, I know you're trying to stop me on this one. Listen, it's first of all, let's just put it out there and just put the elephant on the table. There is no diversity in cyber to the levels that we want, Chris. It is. We needed something to have working progress, and this one is a very serious one as well. I think there are two things here about diversity which falls into the general thing about bringing people into the profession first, before we even look at the diversity. People want to become what they can see. And so if you're not really seeing yourself somewhere, do you really want to be there? So that's the first thing. So a lot of work the council has to do with organizations now. We have a whole lot of work. And the way that I'm starting, and I feel that the council will have to do with organizations, is a kind of layered approach. First, I think I need the top of organizations to support security professionals. Because the thing is that if the top, you can put the most skilled people into an organization, but if the top of the organization doesn't want to do security, you are going to frustrate those same security professionals and they're going to leave. And that is a big thing that we have in the profession. We work hard, attract these people, and then there's so little support for them that they're gone. So the retention part isn't there. And this is the thing with diversity. We have never been kind if we're talking about gender. It doesn't matter about gender, but as I just said, support for the professional is important. But I have found that on the gender side, it's like non-existent. Non-existent. You're on your own. And so I think I definitely have my work cut out. I'm up for it. But I think the council, I can't just start like that. I need to start with the top. Because the top sets the culture. And people look to see, is that an organization that will support me? Is that an organization that's really bought into what they want to do? And I think once we start to crack that, it will be easier to see, because in any profession you need that support. You need that support when you're implementing, when you want to put your passion in there, when you want to stay in there. But gender is still so horrible. Diversity in itself generally is so horrible that I need every one of you sitting out there to help us join that and to take back that fight into the organizations. I'm sorry that I didn't have a nice report to give here on that.
So I suppose my question to the panel members is, so I occasionally hear it said that ultimately we just need skilled people. We don't need that diversity. What would you say to that, Stephen? What would you?
I made quite a face. I mean, that's just nonsense, isn't it? You know, the world we face is changing rapidly. The problems we face are changing rapidly. The response we need needs to change rapidly. The only way you get that kind of effective response is by having diverse teams. But I also note, you touched on ethics, something really quite interesting. It was always easy. I've worked across a range of organizations in my career, and it was always easy to convince people about the benefits of diversity because there are such amazing commercial benefits. There are such amazing efficiency benefits of having these brilliant teams. But actually, morally, it's the right thing to do. So even if it costs you more money, even if it was less effective, which all the research says it isn't, we should still be doing it because it then allows the whole of society to benefit from the great careers that we've had, the benefits, the excitement, the frustrations, the torments of being a cybersecurity professional. It's not all fun, but I think you talked about that there's been something special about this, right? There's a hook about this career that we get to do something that matters. And so many people in their jobs these days don't get to do that. We have a moral obligation to let everybody have a chance to do something that matters. Now, thankfully, it's also economically brilliant and socially brilliant and brilliant for getting to the right outcomes, but actually we morally need to do this. So no, I don't believe that anybody should be saying this isn't necessary, isn't essential, and isn't vital.
Sammy, what do you think?
Ditto. But I would add that you know, the getting future ready from a workforce doesn't entirely depend on technology. It depends on culture, the human adaptability to what's coming, and the culture, you know, is what's going to help us transform the organization. Starts at the top through the leadership and set the example. So that's what I would add to that.
And Kian, diversity.
Yeah, I agree with all of that, and I think that's the goal, isn't it? We want a cyber workforce that's bigger, that's more quality assured, and that's more diverse. And I think as my kind of closing comment, I think the one thing it would be a mistake not to point out is how big a game changer it is to do that regionally rather than nationally. Rather than come up with the answer ourselves and then kind of put it on to everyone else, it's relying on those local connections between industries, schools, and universities to really get in there and inspire everyone on the ground and boost diversity through that point of view as well.
So I think to conclude, so AI won't save the day, well, not necessarily anytime soon. We still need those people with the skills and the expertise to be able to use it in the right way as a tool in an appropriate way. But we also want that next generation who will design AI version 2 or 3 or 4 or whatever's the next thing coming along. But you can't do any of that without that diversity, whether it's of thought, of gender, you know, that's a key thing. So I think I'll pause there. It's been a really interesting discussion. An applause for my panel members, please. I hope you all found that interesting and some thoughts to go away with. The council, we'll be talking about the council in Stream C, so please come along to that. I'm allowed to plug that. And the ecosystem zone, where you'll find out lots of things that we're doing, working with colleagues right across government and industry. Things like Cyber First, Cybersecurity Body of Knowledge, Cyber Essentials, all things are in the ecosystem zone. Please come along. So with that, thank you very much, and thank you, panel.
Lunch will now be served in the exhibition areas, halls 3 and 4. We will see you all shortly for our afternoon programme.